Hi, hello and welcome from wherever you join me today. Are you looking for a movie review channel with a difference from somebody that will tell you all about the movie, including what's in it, the facts, the fiction and the trivia of course? Then you've come to the right place. I'm Jim Black from the Three Hats Stage Media channel, and this is my edition of Pause for Thought, where I review one of my favourite movies and see what messages we can take from it and how we could use those insights in today's busy lives. So let's get into this movie review and find out which movie it is. As you can see from the light box just to my side, today's movie is The Martian, and it's from 2015. It's adapted from the book by Andy Weir, who serialised it on his blog originally. The screenplay is by Drew Goddard, and the director is the fabulous Ridley Scott. So let's find out who's in this movie. This really is a great cast, but what characters do they play and where have you seen them before? We'll start with Matt Damon, who incidentally is one of my favourite actors. He plays Mark Watney. He's the lead character in this particular movie, and you'll know him from all the Jason Bourne movies, as well as Oceans 11, 12 and 13, and probably some more to come, as well as Saving Private Ryan, Good Will Hunting, which he wrote with his good friend Ben Affleck, The Departed, The Talented Mr. Ripley, and the list goes on. Why don't you drop me a comment below and let me know which is your favourite Matt movie. Jessica Chastain. She plays Melissa Lewis, and you'll know her from Zero Dark 30. You'll also know her from Molly's Game, and I'm reliably informed that she's going to play Tammy Wynette in an upcoming movie about George and Tammy. But you'll have to wait till next year to see that. Kata Mara. She plays Beth Johansson. Now you may know her from House of Cards. She played the reporter Zoe, and she was pushed under a New York subway train by the upcoming president Frank. But it is only a drama, remember. She was also in Shooter, as well as Fantastic Four. And if you've ever watched that great TV series 24, she was in the hours 9 PM through to 2 AM. But you'll know what I mean if you've watched it. There's Michael Pena. He plays Rick Martinez, and you'll probably know him from The Shield, or maybe even $1 Million Baby. He was also in that great movie World Trade Center, and he was also in Shooter, alongside Kata Mara. There's Jeff Daniels. He plays the director of NASA, Teddy Sanders, and you'll know him from Dumb and Dumber 1 and 2. You may also know him as Roger in 101 Dalmatians, as well as my favourite Martian, and he played John Scully in the Steve Jobs movie. Sean Bean plays Mitch Henderson. Now you'll know him from Lady Chatterley, Sharp, Broken. He's also been in movies such as Ronin with Robert De Niro, Flight Plan with Jodie Foster. He's also been in Frankenstein Chronicles, to name but a few. And again, if you want to leave me a comment to which one your favourite is, I'll read them and get back to you. And you can't forget the characters he played in Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. But there's an interesting fact about that coming up later in the trivia section. Chiwetel Ejiofor. Now he plays Vincent Kapoor, and you may know him from things such as The Shadow Line, 12 Years a Slave, and one of my favourite movies which he appeared in was Kinky Boots. Benedict Wong. He plays Bruce, and he was in Spy Game with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt. He was also in The Bill, Top Boy and Gemini Man more recently. There's Kristen Wiig. She plays Annie Montrose, and you'll definitely know her from Arrested Development, State of Play, and my favourite movie of all time, Paul, with Nick Frost and Simon Pegg. What a great comedy movie that is. The rest of the cast include Ansel Henny, Mackenzie Davis, Donald Glover, Sebastian Stan, Shen Chu and Eddie Ko. And I can't go into all their past because we'll be here all day. So I ask, is it right? When everything seems lost, is it possible still to succeed? And don't we need people around us to help us do that? So let's get into the thoughtful bit before the main movie review. Could you survive against all odds? when everything seems lost? Could you deal with the challenges and the extremes that that situation could put you in? Or do you need the support network around you that we've all got? The people that are there for us at times of need. But sometimes you do have to work things out on your own first. In this movie review, The Martian, we find Mark Watney left on a planet millions of miles from anywhere. We're going to see how he deals with the problems he faces and what he does about them to survive. We'll also find out that the people that think he's lost work out that he's not and then try and help him. So let's see how those two things come together as we follow Mark's journey through this movie, as we get into the review. What another great movie this is. It's a bit of a cross between sci-fi and real life. And in real life I mean the fact that we are trying to explore things that are beyond our capabilities at the moment. But you never know, in the future that could all change. So we find ourselves on the planet Mars. We have a group of astronauts of all capabilities doing some research to find out if we could inhabit the red planet at some point in the future. Out on the surface we have Mark, Melissa and Alex. They're taking soil samples to find out what the likelihood of growing food would be on Mars. Beth and Chris are monitoring everything on the computers, and Rick is checking out the support vehicle that takes them back to the mothership that's up in space. All of a sudden there's an emergency sound. It's an incoming storm. It's of magnitude they've never seen before, and there's a chance that everything could be destroyed, including them. Commander Lewis needs to decide whether to abort the mission, get back onto the support vehicle and blast off into space before it's too late. Some of the astronauts want to stay and find out whether it's going to actually be a severe storm like it's supposed to be, but the decision is made and off they start to charge towards the support vehicle. Rick's getting it ready, firing it up, and they only have a very short window before the support vehicle will tip over and they'll all die. In the confusion, Mark gets knocked over and they can't find him. They have to make that decision at that point to leave him. They get onto the little rocket and blast off to the main mothership, which is docked out in space. It's a very upsetting time for them, and we realise at that point that Mark must be dead, because he wouldn't have been able to survive a storm like that. NASA has to make that announcement to the world that they've lost Mark, but all the rest of the crew are safe and well and they're beginning to head home. We zoom back to the planet again and we find Mark waking up. He's been knocked over, he's been knocked out, and there's a race against time now to secure his suit, which is running out of oxygen, and get back to the main hab where they can find out what's gone on. Back in the hab, he realises that he's been pierced by a piece of antenna through his spacesuit, which has knocked out his life support system, which is why the rest of the crew thought he was dead. He does some repairs on himself, a little bit of surgery, takes out the missing pieces, makes sure he's got it all out of his stomach, and sews himself up, as you would do, in everyday life. He's then faced with a realisation that he's on his own. There's no spaceship there anymore. There's nobody about. There's been some devastation from the storm, things have been tipped over, and he's got to decide what he's going to do. He can't contact anybody because his communications are out. So what will be his plan? A few days have now gone past, and I'm going to talk in sols, because that's the years in space-time, apparently. So we're at Sol 24, and Mark adds up all the food and all the supplies he's got. He's very logical, he writes everything down and works out that if he stretches it out, he could probably make all the supplies last until 400 days, which gives him a bit of a chance. Although he does talk about the rest of the problems that he may face, such as water supply, electricity supply, more weather conditions, and all the things that might kill him. But what could go wrong apart from that? We find out at this point that Mark is a botanist, which is great, because that means his job is to find ways to make food. Now he realises once he's going through all the supplies, that there's a special box that they were going to use for Thanksgiving. And in it he finds a bag of potatoes. And we all know that if you plant the eyes from the potatoes, you'll grow more potatoes. Potato has been the sole source food for many, many years. And we all love them. Chips, mashed potato, fries, you name it, we can make potatoes into anything. And make them enjoyable, of course. But how can he do this on the planet that's got no water, no soil of any sort of substance? Now he's a scientist, so he's going to look at every bit of science possible and try and work out what to do. Now he knows that if you have some sort of soil, which the red planet does have, and water and some seeds, there's every chance that you can grow something. So with some rocket fuel and some inspirational work by setting up like a pod with plastic and soil and all that sort of stuff, anything's possible. There's also the fact of the human leftovers, shall we say the bits that come out the toilet, because as we know, manure is a great fertiliser. But I don't want to go too much into that detail. We now found ourselves at Sol 54. It's the only way to move the story on. And we're back at NASA with Teddy and Vincent talking about what's going to happen. They still think that Mark is dead because they don't know any better. Vincent wants to start the Mars missions again so that we can get up there and reclaim some of the stuff. Teddy's against the idea because as soon as you start looking at the planet, you may find the dead body of Mark Watney. And we don't want to show that to the world at this point. We then move to the main flight room. It's the one with all the big desks with all the equipment and the big screens up in front of them. And we find Mindy. A message comes through on her computer. She plots the coordinates and it's Mars. Very strange, she thinks. She starts to get really close into the picture because the satellite has picked up something that's happening. She realises that there's been some movement. She immediately rings security to find out the number of Vincent and Teddy and Annie. They all turn up, it's 2:30 in the morning, and she says that Mark's alive. Vincent agrees with her, and Teddy and Annie decide that they're going to have to tell the world that Mark is now alive, even though they told them he was dead earlier, if you know what I mean. They all start to wonder what it must be like for Mark, because they don't think that he's possibly going to be able to survive. After all, it will take a long time, 3 or 4 years to get back to Mars to rescue him, and he can't sustain life up there all that time with no food, no water, and the electricity about to run out. But they don't know Mark very well at this point, do they? But we'll get into that a little bit more as we move through the movie. We then flash back to the ship, and we find that Mark has found the music of his commander, and all she's got is disco music. It plays quite an important role in this movie. Over the next 20 days or so, we see Mark working through problems, looking at things from a different point of view, because he knows the only way to survive is by working out the science. Science always wins every time. And if you liked it at school like I did, you'll know what I mean. He works out that he must get to the Scapinelli crater, because that's where the next Ares mission is going to land. So if he gets there, they can meet up with the astronauts. It's 50 days travel, but how will he do it? He's only got the little buggy that he uses to move things around in. And this only has a short life battery of 2 hours. So how will he overcome that? If he puts the power on in the buggy, it drains the battery even quicker. The planet gets very cold at times, especially at night. And that way he'd freeze to death, and what can he do about that? You can see so many problems. And this is where he puts on the least disco track that Commander Lewis has got, and it's Hot Stuff by Donna Summer. And we see a little montage of things going on here, and he finds that there's a nuclear power pack somewhere buried, which the crew left some time ago. And he knows that the heat off that will warm him up. And as he's driving along in his buggy with his new heater, in his t-shirt, Hot Love is playing. And he does a little dip of the shoulders, like that. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in the trivia towards the end of this review. All this time Mindy's watching him, watching his movements. But satellite delay is very slow, so you don't always find out what he's doing straight away. Vincent's very interested as to what he's doing, and they're trying to work out where he's going. She tells him that he drives for 2 hours, then he stops. Then he drives for 2 hours, then he stops. And they rush to the restaurant and find a picture on the wall. They plot his course and they realise that he's heading towards Pathfinder, which was a mission many years ago that NASA launched. And if he gets Pathfinder back to the base, he might be able to contact NASA again. Vincent realises what he's going to do. So he gets on a plane and flies out to JPL, which stands for Jet Propulsion Limited. Now, I don't know if you know this, but in space travel, anything that they do, they make a replica of it. The exact model that they're going to put into space, into use. And this is because they can then work through any problems that might happen when that piece of equipment is up in space. Clever, isn't it? So they dig out the old Pathfinder unit and they open it up and get it ready with the old Pathfinder team from back in the day, because they're the best people to know how it works, obviously. Mark gets the Pathfinder rocket back to the base. He opens it up, plugs it in, and it starts to work. It then communicates with Earth. Fantastic. He finds out that they can hear him and they know he's alive. He works out that there's a special code that can communicate between Earth and Mars. Phew, it's confusing, isn't it? But I'll tell you more as we go on. After a short while, NASA find that they can make it talk better to a computer by hotwiring it. And all Mark needs to do is put some new codes into the system. He does this and they're both able to communicate with each other via typewriter, just like you would with a text or an email. Mark finds out through the communications that nobody's told the crew of the Hermes that he's still alive, which is a very upsetting time for Mark because he feels more alone than ever, even though he can now talk to Earth. But after a lot of discussion, the crew is then told. They're obviously over the moon, but also at the same time they're sad because there's nothing they can do. The Hermes must head back towards Earth or else they will run out of supplies and die too. And then 6 dead astronauts instead of just 1. It's a small price to pay, but it's somebody's got to make that decision. And Teddy makes that decision as that's what's going to happen. But we'll find out a bit more shortly. As time passes and the communications become greater between Earth and Mars, Mark starts to find the loneliness and the anxiety and the depression setting in. This becomes more apparent when there's a storm one night and Mark loses all the crops that he's been growing. But luckily for Mark, he's already grown enough to keep him going to a certain time. But unluckily for Mark, the food will then run out to go and rescue him because it would take too long. What will happen next? Next we find Rich Parnell. He's an astrophysicist and he works out that the steely-eyed man can make a difference. You'll know what I mean because it comes from NASA itself. It was on Apollo 12 and 13. So if you want to watch the movie Apollo 13, then I suggest you do so because the line is used in that too. Now he works out that he can do something about the amount of time it's going to take to go and rescue him. He can cut it down by virtually half. He just needs to run the numbers and work it out. At the same time as Rich Parnell working out what he can do, NASA decide to launch a supplies vessel. This will be sent up into space. It will get to Mars earlier than the rescue crew, but it will give Mark a lot longer to survive with new supplies such as food and water. So Rich Parnell's version of events is correct. He races over to NASA to tell Vincent. Vincent agrees with him and they go to a secret meeting called Elrond. But I'll tell you more about that in the trivia in a little while. Rick shows them that if they use the gravitational pull of Earth, they can send the Hermes around it, fire a supply ship up to it, it can catch it and it can head back towards Mars. They can then cut down the mission by about 200 days. They'll save Mark and everybody will be happy. The only difficulty is Teddy. He doesn't want to do it because saving 5 astronauts, bringing them home now, against losing 1 Mark, is a lot better odds. And that's where we leave it at that point. Mitch decides to tell the crew. It's off his own back, so he will get in trouble for it. And the crew find out that if they want to go back, they must make the decision, because nobody can make that decision for them. It's going to add extra time to space, and there's always a chance that they will die as well. But obviously they make that decision, they override all the ship's computers because they don't want Earth controlling it, and head back. Now at this time, the Chinese Space Authority has decided that it will help the Americans because they don't want that man to die in space. At this time, the Chinese Space Authority has decided from looking on that they don't want Mark to die either. And they've got better rockets and things like that ready now that they could use to send the supplies up to the Hermes. There's a meeting between the two hands are shaken and it's decided. They launch the rocket with all the supplies on, and the Chinese and the Americans become great friends in the space race. The Hermes crew is going to take another 2 years to get there, and we're going to flash through time now, and the communications between Mark and NASA have been going on for a long time, because he's got to get ready as well. He needs to get to that crater and blast off in a rocket that's waiting for him there. And what's going to happen is Hermes is going to fly past and catch him, just like that. But he's got to make some adjustments to the little module that's going to go up into space. There's a chance that it will fail. There's a chance he'll die. There's a chance the crew will die. And there's all sorts of problems that will be overcome, I can assure you, by the end of the movie. Now, it is the end of the movie here. And what will happen is that Mark will get rescued. And humanity will breathe a sigh of relief. We'll all become friends, and the world will become a better place. Well, it will in the movie anyway. Like I said at the start of the movie, this really is a good film, and I suggest you watch it and make up your own mind. But if we all be friends, think, listen, be kind and talk to each other, we may just make it a better place, like the movie wants us to. Now let's get into the trivia and the music that surround this movie, because it really is very good. First bit of trivia I've got for you is, do you remember I told you about Hot Love and Mark Watney doing the shoulder dip? Well, it's a nod to the Full Monty when they're in the labour exchange looking for jobs, and Hot Love is playing on the system above them, and each one of them do that. So Mark thought it'd be a great idea to pay homage to that movie. Another bit of trivia I've got for you is, in the opening credits we see the title of the movie, The Martian. Now this begins to fade out with the eye of Martian just hovering for a few seconds. Now this is a nod to the Ridley Scott movie, Alien. And in that, in the title, Alien appears letter by letter. Can you remember earlier in this movie, there was a secret meeting at NASA, and they gave it the code name Elrond. Now this is direct relation to the Lord of the Rings, because there was a secret meeting there with the Council of Elrond. In this movie, Teddy, the director of NASA, wants to be called Glorfindel, and he was at that meeting in the Lord of the Rings. Well, the character was, anyway. But Sean Bean was at both meetings. He was at this one at NASA, and he was also at the Council of Elrond as his character Boromir. Great bit of information and trivia, I think that is. The final bit of trivia I've got for you is about Teddy and his decision to not want to save Mark, the one person that needed saving. Because if he did, he possibly could lose all 6 of the astronauts, and that would be a futile mission. Now, if you know Saving Private Ryan, you will know that this was a similar mission. They all had to go and risk their own lives to save Ryan. Now, did you also know that in both cases it was Matt Damon? And that, I think, is the best bit of trivia I've done for a long time. The music in this movie is really good, and I've left a link in the description below to the soundtrack if you want to download it. You've got Harry Gregson Williams. He's responsible for all the instrumental music that makes the movie so atmospheric at times. There's also all the other tracks that I've talked about, Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive, and in that there is a line that says, "So now you're back from outer space." Another bit of trivia there for you that should have been in the other bit. There's Donna Summer, there's the Hughes Corporation, there's ABBA, David Bowie, and the theme from Happy Days, that incidentally was sang by Pratt and McLean. For your information, that is. I hope you've enjoyed this movie review. If you want to join our community, then please hit the subscription button. And if you want to know when I upload again, hit that notification bell. I always appreciate likes because it lets me know that I'm doing the right thing. And if you want to leave a comment, I will get back to you as and when I can. I've been Jim Black for the Three Hats Stage Media channel for this edition of Pause for Thought, and I hope to see you again soon.